It wasn't a lack of money that kept me stuck, it was a spiritual misalignment I couldn't see. For years, I thought I was doing everything right. I prayed, I tithed, I believed, but I kept hitting the same invisible wall. No matter how hard I pushed, something always held me back. Opportunities would come and slip away, peace felt temporary, provision felt distant. And deep down, I began to wonder, is there something I'm missing? That question led me into a season I'll never forget. A season where God didn't just answer me, He exposed me. Not to shame me, but to show me what I had been blind to all along. Because the truth is ... prosperity isn't random. It's not a reward for the lucky or the loud. It's the fruit of a principle, a divine pattern, a kingdom law. And this law is hidden, not from us but for us. Hidden in verses we've memorized but never lived. In teachings we've heard but never understood. What I discovered shifted everything: my finances, yes, but also my peace, my clarity, and my purpose. And now I want to take you through that same journey. If you've ever felt like you're close to breakthrough but never quite there, if you've ever wondered why the windows of heaven still feel closed, stay with me, because what you're about to hear goes deeper than money. In the next few minutes, you will discover the hidden secrets behind the biblical principles of prosperity. And once you see them, you won't be able to unsee them. Let's begin. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below with your city or country. And if you believe you're ready to receive God's blessings, drop the number 7 in the comments, symbolizing prosperity and blessings. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could also be blessed. Let's map together where the fire of the Spirit is reaching and bringing prosperity. I used to chase provision like a man chasing the wind. I thought if I prayed hard enough, worked long enough, sacrificed deeply enough, then maybe, just maybe, God would notice me. But no matter how much I did, I always felt like I was one step behind the blessing. Until one night, exhausted and empty, I cried out not with eloquent words, but with silence. And in that stillness, I felt a whisper deep within, I am not the reward. I am the source. That moment shattered something inside me. I had been treating God like a vending machine, not like a father. Philippians 4:19 came alive. My God will supply all your needs according to His riches in glory by Christ Jesus. It wasn't about what I could earn. It was about who He is. True prosperity doesn't begin with strategies or effort. It begins with trust, with surrender. With knowing that God is not withholding from us, but waiting for us to stop looking everywhere else. When I began to anchor my hope in Him alone, the pressure lifted. The fear of lack lost its grip. I stopped chasing and I started abiding. And that's when provision started flowing, not because I got everything right, but because I finally looked in the right direction. He is the source, and when I truly saw Him as that, I realized I was never without. There was a time I was asking God for more, but deep down, I knew my heart wasn't ready to hold it. I wanted blessing without transformation. I prayed for abundance, but I still clung to fear, pride, and hidden motives. And then one morning, I read Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. That verse hit me like lightning. I had been trying to build a life of prosperity on a heart full of contradictions. How could I receive what heaven wanted to give if I was holding on to things God never planted? I began to pray differently. Not just, God, give me more, but God, make me ready. I asked Him to clean the rooms I had closed off, to remove the idols I didn't want to admit I worshipped. And it hurt, but it healed me. Slowly, my heart began to shift. I stopped seeing money as validation. I stopped seeing success as a cure for insecurity. My hands were still open, but now so was my heart. And then, little by little, things began to move. What I couldn't access before now started coming without striving. Because alignment opens doors that hustle never will. Prosperity is not just about receiving, it's about becoming the kind of person who can carry the weight of the blessing without being crushed by it. And that begins inside. For years, I thought prosperity was random. I thought God just chose a few to be blessed while others had to scrape by. But that belief shattered the day I saw Galatians 6-7 not just as a verse but as a mirror. Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. A man reaps what he sows. I looked at my life and realized I hadn't been sowing. Not really, I was hoping, wishing, waiting, but I wasn't planting anything. I wanted harvest without seed and breakthrough without obedience. That truth broke me. I wept not because I felt condemned, but because I saw the opportunity I had wasted. From that day forward, I made a decision to sow in faith. Not just money, but kindness, excellence, service, forgiveness, sacrifice, seeds of the kingdom, and over time I watched them grow. Not overnight, but they grew. Doors opened. Provision flowed, peace increased, my soul expanded. Because God's economy is never unfair, it's just unseen. The seed you plant today is already creating the future you prayed for. But you have to sow it, and sow it with faith, even when the ground looks dry. Now I don't ask why am I not seeing results. I ask what am I planting, because prosperity isn't magic. It's principle, and those who sow always reap. I used to think I had a money problem, but what I really had was a management problem. I would ask God for increase, but I wasn't stewarding what He had already placed in my hands. I called it not enough, but in truth, it was more than enough to test my heart. Luke 16:10 echoed in my spirit, "Whoever is faithful with very little will also be faithful with much." That verse stopped me cold. I realized I was praying for multiplication while living in disorder. I never budgeted, I didn't plan. I avoided responsibility and called it faith. But real faith doesn't avoid order, it honors it. God is a God of structure, of wisdom, of intentionality. When He fed the 5,000, Jesus didn't just multiply, He organized. Mark 6:39-40. That struck me. God blesses what is ready to be handled. So I started small, I tracked my spending. I asked God for wisdom, I stopped wasting what wasn't mine. And slowly, peace came, not because I had more, but because I was finally honoring what I had. That's when more came, because God won't pour new oil into a leaking vessel. Stewardship isn't about having a lot, it's about being trustworthy. If we don't value the little, we're not ready for the overflow. And I learned this, God is not just looking for desire. He's looking for discipline, and where there is order, there is blessing. There were times I knew what God wanted me to do, and I didn't do it. Not because I hated Him, but because I was afraid. Afraid of losing control, afraid of what obedience might cost. And yet I wondered why the breakthrough never came. Until one day I opened to Isaiah 1:19, "If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land." That verse felt personal, not poetic, not distant. Like a direct call to surrender. I had been willing but not obedient. I said yes in my heart, but not yet with my actions. I wanted God's abundance, but I hadn't given Him full access to my life. And the truth is, prosperity flows through submission. Not just to His promises, but to His process. When I finally obeyed completely, painfully, honestly, I discovered a different kind of peace, one that didn't depend on results. And yet, results came, not because I forced them, but because I aligned. I gave what He asked me to give. I let go of what He told me to release, and the weight lifted. Obedience doesn't always make sense, it often feels backwards. But it positions you under the waterfall of God's provision. He honors surrender. And when we give Him everything, we find He had so much more waiting on the other side of our yes. Obedience doesn't cost, it unlocks. I once asked God to bless my plans. I prayed hard, with passion, with tears, but the more I pushed, the more closed everything felt. Until one day, in the quiet, I sensed God asking me a question I wasn't prepared for. Do you want prosperity? Or do you want purpose? That question exposed me. I had dreams, but no direction, ambition, but no assignment. Then I read Proverbs 29 minutes and 18 seconds, where there is no vision, the people perish, and it pierced me. I had been chasing results, not revelation. God doesn't fund confusion. He funds purpose, so I asked him to show me the vision. Not just what I wanted, but what he designed me for. And he began to reveal the pieces, clarity of purpose, not just goals, alignment with his kingdom, not just my preferences, sensitivity to timing, not just desire, focus on eternity, not just outcomes, a mission that blesses others, not just me. When that vision took root in my soul, everything shifted. I stopped striving and started building. I began to speak differently, plan differently, give differently, and provision followed. Because now, God wasn't just blessing my life, he was investing in his own purpose through me. Prosperity is never random, it's attracted to purpose. And when we carry heaven's vision, earth releases its resources. There was a season when I only saw what I lacked. I prayed for more, but with a heart heavy from what hadn't arrived. I thought I was being honest with God, but deep down, I was bitter. Until one day, I read John 6:11. Jesus had 5 loaves and a fish. It wasn't enough. The crowd was massive. But before he multiplied, he gave thanks. That verse shook me. Jesus thanked God for not enough, and it became more than enough. That day, I stopped asking and started thanking. I looked around my home and whispered, "Thank you for the breath in my lungs, for the peace I had, even if the money was tight." Something shifted. Gratitude doesn't change God, it changes us. It opens our eyes, it quiets our fear. It unlocks contentment and makes space for joy. And that joy, it attracts heaven's attention. Suddenly, doors began opening that I didn't knock on. Not because I had done more, but because I had seen differently. I realized that thankfulness is not a reaction, it's a weapon. It multiplies the moment. It invites increase. And it reminds us that we are already rich if we have him. The heart that honors what it holds will always be trusted with more. I once held tightly to what little I had, thinking I was protecting it. But fear made me stingy. I tithed inconsistently. I gave when it was easy, and deep down, I worried, if I give this, what will I have left? Then I read Proverbs 11:24. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. That verse exposed the lie I was living. I was waiting to be generous once I had more, but God was asking me to sow now, so I did. And it wasn't easy. The first time I gave sacrificially, my hands trembled. But my heart soared. I wasn't just giving, I was trusting. I learned that generosity doesn't subtract, it multiplies. Not just finances, but peace, joy, clarity. I started seeing needs around me differently. Giving became my act of worship. A declaration that God, not money, was my source. And over time, what I gave began to return, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. Because that's the nature of kingdom math. You never lose what you release in faith. The generous soul isn't lucky, they're aligned. They've entered into a flow of provision that fear can't touch. And once you taste that kind of freedom, you never want to go back to surviving. You were made to overflow. I used to think prosperity was measured by numbers, dollars in the bank, opportunities gained, comfort secured. But something changed the day I sat at a funeral and watched a man weep, not for what he lost, but for what he never gave. That moment marked me. Jesus said in Matthew 6:20, "Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven," and I realized I had spent so much time building a life here that I forgot to build a legacy there. What good is prosperity if it dies with us? True wealth isn't what we hold, it's what we release into eternity. That revelation flipped everything. I stopped asking, "How can I get more?" and started asking, "How can I make it matter?" I began to give differently, serve differently, live differently. Because now I saw that kingdom prosperity doesn't fade. It echoes, it multiplies long after we're gone. It changes families, communities, generations, and more than that, it pleases the heart of God. If you gain the world but lose your purpose, you're still poor. But if you live for eternity, you'll prosper in ways this world can never measure. Eternal prosperity is the only kind that never ends, and that's the kind I'm after now. Now that I've walked you through everything God revealed to me, I feel a deep stillness in my spirit. Because I know some of you didn't just watch this message, you felt it. Maybe it exposed something, maybe it unlocked something, or maybe it confirmed what you've been sensing all along but didn't know how to name. I've learned that prosperity isn't about chasing, it's about aligning. It's not about luck, it's about living in sync with God's principles. And once those principles take root, everything begins to shift, first in the heart, then in the hands. That's what happened to me, not overnight, but day by day, decision by decision, surrender by surrender. And now I walk with peace, knowing that I'm no longer striving for blessings, I'm walking with the blesser. So if this word reached you, if something inside you whispered, "This was for me," don't let it pass by. Sometimes the smallest act of faith opens the deepest flow of grace. If you're ready to live by these principles, if you're saying in your spirit, "I want to walk in kingdom alignment," just write in the comments, "I'm ready." That's it. Your response doesn't need to be loud, just honest. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to walk this journey with you. There's more to be revealed. More principles, more truths, more life. This was just the beginning. And I believe your new season has already begun.